Morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the University of Milan, the Faculty of Political Science, for the Participatory Constitutionalism Forum, organized within the framework of the European project Participatory Constitutionalism in European Union, or Particon-EU. I would like to thank all the speakers, participants for joining us, especially those who have traveled from abroad to share their knowledge and experience. I also wish to express my gratitude to all colleagues and collaborators who have contributed to the organization of this event and to the broader activities of the Particon project. Today, we have the privilege of bringing together distinguished scholars and experts from Italy and several European countries to reflect on one of the most important challenges facing contemporary constitutional democracy: how to strengthen citizen participation while preserving the fundamental principles of representative democracy. I would like to briefly recall the purpose of this project and the role of our unity of Milan within it, so that speakers and members of the audience who are not part of the research network can better understand its objectives and development. Particon-EU is a very innovative project aimed at strengthening democratic participation and constitutional awareness across the European Union through the co-creation of an innovative research instrument, the Social Embeddedness of Constitutions Index, or SEC Index. The project is coordinated by a multidisciplinary consortium bringing together universities, NGOs, and local authorities, with the leading role played by Professor Monica Plorczak and the team of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, whose contribution has been crucial in shaping both the scientific vision and the participatory project. The project actively involves citizens, civil society organizations, researchers, and policymakers, not only in the development of the index, but also in its testing, evaluation, and practical application. The SEC index will provide a novel tool for assessing citizen identification with constitutional values and their willingness to participate in shaping constitutional frameworks, thereby offering important insights into the health of democracy in EU member states. Particon-EU seeks to respond to some of the most pressing challenges facing contemporary democracies. Participatory constitutions is becoming increasingly relevant in a global context characterized by voter abstention, political polarization, the rise of populism, and environmental crisis, and geopolitical instability. Against this background, the project promotes a model of democracy grounded in citizen active involvement and constitutional interest. This vision closely aligns with the objectives of the CERV program, which supports citizen participation, democratic engagement, and the strengthening of a shared European civic culture. Ultimately, the project will contribute not only to the creation of the SEC index, but also to the development of a new theoretical framework of constitutionalism 3.0, offering innovative tools and ideas for strengthening participatory democracy in Europe. The role of the Milan Research Unit is to contribute to the comparative study of the constitutional framework of the 6 countries participating in the network, which are Italy, France, Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. However, for today's forum, in addition to presenting the reports of the 6 national case studies prepared by members of the research units under the supervision of Monica Plorczak and myself, we decided to introduce during the morning session the broader topic of participation in its various dimensions. This will be explored through contributions from colleagues with expertise in the study of participatory constitutionalism and also its practical implementation. We are also very pleased to welcome a German colleague whose experience of deliberative practices is certainly more direct and hands-on. In Germany, as I understand, He actively coordinates a team of young researchers and practitioners working in this field and is deeply engaged in deliberative processes. I would also like to clarify that although the first part of the forum will focus primarily on deliberative and participatory democracy, the national reports also take account of direct democracy. While in Italian constitutional literatures, these two forms of participation are generally treated as conceptually distinct, this is not necessarily the case in other countries. During the final discussion of the day, time permitting, we will seek to compare the similarities and differences between the respective constitutional reports and the practical implementation. Before giving the floor to my colleague Caterina Fittini, who will chair this morning's session, I would like to remind you to sign the attendance sheet, and if possible, include your email address, maybe already clear, because we want to inform about future activities of the project and to share additional materials as well as photographs taken during this morning's event. Thank you very much for your cooperation. I'm pleased to hand over to Caterina. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your introduction and for the clear explaining of the project. And so I move forward to our session and introduce you. I'm pleased to introduce you, first of all, Martina Trettel. She's a senior researcher at the Institute of Comparative Federalism of the Orac Research Center of Bolzano. She's an expert on deliberative and participatory democracy. She has authored several publications on these topics in academic journals as well as in edited books. Her recent publications include the co-edited volume Federalism and the Law of Diversity, the theoretical contribution of federalism to the explanation of emergent models for the accommodation of diversity. So she's going to speak about today participatory constitutionalism, comparative framework, and provincial experiences. So I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Do I need the microphone? I don't need the microphone. You can all hear it. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So,
yes, they will. No, this is
so they will hear me. Okay. So good morning. Thank you very much, first of all, for having me here today. I'm very excited. I think it's a very special occasion for exchanging about participatory and deliberative democracy. So yeah, I hope my contribution today will give you some food for thought for the later discussions. So today, I for the first time, I didn't choose to have a proper slideshow, but of course, I was helped by artificial intelligence. I could never make something like that myself, but I decided to have this kind of infographic behind me where I summarize everything I will say, so you can follow along while I say and while I give you my thoughts about participatory constitutionalism. So I slightly changed the title that Angela proposed. I just changed from provincial experiences to national experiences, because what I would like to do today is not only to focus on participatory constitutionalism at the national level, but I would like to mainly focus also on the national level, because I think this level of government gives us particularly interesting hints about development of participatory democracy, also at the national level. So first of all, what I would like to do is to give you what I intend with the concept of deliberative democratic innovations. So I agree with the definition of Elsie Van Escobar. Maybe you are familiar with that, even though this definition was elaborated in 2019, and I would like to read it out to you so that we are all on the same page. So democratic innovations are processes or institutions that are new to a particular policy issue, policy role, or level of governance, and are designed to reimagine and defend the role of citizens in governance by increasing opportunities for participation, deliberation, and influence. So I will refer to these as deliberative democratic innovations. And what is interesting is that what makes these innovations deliberative is not simply the fact that citizens participate. Rather, citizens are expected to exchange arguments, consider different perspectives, weigh evidence, and collectively reflect before reaching recommendations. So the emphasis in this kind of innovations is not placed only on participation, but on the quality of public reasoning. So as we all know, this broader understanding of deliberative democratic innovations include a wide range of institutional arrangements: citizens' assemblies, deliberative mini-publics, participatory budgeting, and constitutional convention. So they all differ in their design, but they share one common objective. So the objective is to create more meaningful forms of interaction between citizens and public institutions, also using often, but not always, forms of random selection of citizens in the composition of assemblies. But it is not always the case. So from a constitutional perspective, which is what is interesting us today, I guess, the key issue is not the existence per se of participatory mechanisms, but the extent to which these innovations are embedded within constitutional and institutional frameworks. Because the important message we want to send here is that it's very important to consider deliberative democratic innovations not as an alternative to representative democracy, rather as an attempt to strengthen representative constitutional systems by creating institutional channels through which citizens can contribute to public decision. So this was my introduction, and this I would like to develop these arguments in two steps. So first of all, I would like to briefly discuss participatory constitutionalism from a comparative constitutional perspective, looking at its main challenges. And second, I will argue that some of the most interesting developments in Europe in participatory constitutionalism are emerging at the subnational level, where regions, autonomous provinces, Länder, and other territorial entities are increasingly acting as laboratories of democratic innovation. So, why is participatory constitutionalism, has participatory constitutionalism become so important in the last couple of decades? And I don't think is that because democracy as itself failed, but I think participatory constitutionalism reflects the profound transformations that contemporary constitutional democracies are experiencing. In fact, I think there are three developments that we may consider very relevant when looking at the challenges that constitutional democracies are experiencing. So the first concerns democratic legitimacy. So contemporary constitutional democracy are not facing a crisis of democracy itself. Democracy remains, and I think we all agree about that, the only widely accepted source of political legitimacy. What is increasingly under pressure is the representative dimension of democracy. So elections remain indispensable, but they are no longer perceived as sufficient to ensure that citizens feel adequately represented throughout the entire policymaking process. So this growing distance between citizens and representative institutions has stimulated the search for complementary forms of democratic participation. So the second challenge that constitutional democracies are experiencing is complexity. So public decisions have become increasingly complex. Climate change, digital transformation, migration, energy policies, and many others all involve highly technical issues, multiple stakeholders, and conflicting interests. Under these conditions, democratic legitimacy cannot rely exclusively on electoral authorization. It increasingly depends on the capacity of institutions to involve citizens and other stakeholders throughout the decision-making process. Finally, there is a third transformation and challenge, which I would describe as changing constitutional expectations. So citizens increasingly expect constitutions not only to organize public powers and protect fundamental rights, but also to create meaningful opportunities for participation. So participation is no longer understood merely as voting every few years. It is increasingly regarded as an integral dimension of constitutional democracy itself. So, said that, I think all these challenges give us an idea why participatory constitutionalism is so important. However, we also have to keep in mind, on the other side of the spectrum, is that not every form of deliberative democratic innovation strengthens constitutional democracy. Simply creating opportunities for participation does not automatically produce better democratic outcomes. Participation is constitutionally meaningful only when it becomes part of the institutional architecture of democratic decision-making. In other words, participation should not be evaluated by the number of participatory processes that are organized. Rather, it should be assessed according to its capacity to improve democratic legitimacy, accountability, and the quality of public decisions. And from these perspectives, I see three fundamental challenges regarding participation. So the first one regards participation and representation. So we have to consider that representation remains the cornerstone of constitutional government. Then participation and expertise. So contemporary public policy requires specialized technical knowledge. So the challenge is therefore not to choose between experts and citizens, but to design institutional processes capable of integrating different forms of knowledge. And third, and I think the most important, when it comes to deliberative democratic innovations, is efficiency. Because participation inevitably raises questions of efficiency, because participatory processes require time, organizational resources, political commitment, administrative commitment, and money. So, and they also may slow down decision-making. However, they can also improve the quality, legitimacy, and long-term acceptance of public decisions. So the constitutional challenge is to find an appropriate balance between inclusiveness and effective governance. So these challenges have become particularly visible over the last 20 years when these democratic innovations have arisen. And this leads us to another question. So where are these institutional innovations actually taking place? And this is where I start to develop my second argument, so that many of the most interesting developments in participatory constitutionalism are not happening at the national level. In fact, they are increasingly emerging within subnational constitutional systems. In fact, when discussing participatory constitutionalism, constitutional lawyers tend to focus mainly on national constitutions, constitutional amendments, or constituent processes. For example, Iceland, we know, was the first to establish a participatory citizens-based constitutional assembly alongside its regular legislature. Also, other participatory experiences involve ordinary citizens in growing up or amending constitutions with variable degrees of success or failure. So among which Ireland, Romania, and Chile. We all know these cases. So the topic of participatory constitutionalism has been analyzed from diverging disciplinary angles and through different methodological and terminological approaches. All these demonstrate that the focus of the observers has been set mainly on the practices that took place at the central level of government. Even if the trend of employing democratic innovations to deliberate on constitutional and institutional issues also affects the national level of government, although with different modes and investments. In fact, there are less analyses that look at participatory constitution making at the national level of government. But today, I want to stress the fact that regions, land, provinces, and in Italy, autonomous provinces, I come from one, so this is why it's particularly interesting to me, and other territorial entities that are at the national level have increasingly become laboratories for democratic innovation. And this should not surprise us. In fact, multi-level governance has shown us that national governments often provide favorable conditions for institutional experimentation. They operate, so national levels of government operate closer to citizens, they enjoy sometimes greater flexibility in institutional design, and they are frequently able to test innovative governance arrangements before they spread to other levels of government. So participation and deliberative democratic innovation, therefore, fit particularly well within multi-level constitutional systems. So in my research that I'm carrying on since more than 10 years now, I looked at the relationship between decentralization and participatory democracy, and I found that this is not accidental. Rather, decentralized constitutional systems often provide, but of course not only, but often provide the institutional space necessary for democratic innovations to develop, adapt, and gradually become institutionalized. And here I would like to give you 3 examples. One is Italy. So I don't know if you are aware of that, but during the last decade, several Italian regions adopted legislative frameworks specifically aimed at promoting participatory democracy. So Tuscany was among the pioneers with the law of 2007 that was then revised in 2013, followed by Emilia-Romagna and also other regional experiences that progressively transformed participation from isolated initiatives into more structured public policies. These regional frameworks have demonstrated that participatory democracy can become an ordinary component of policymaking rather than an exceptional democratic experiment. And just as a side mark, the Tuscany regional framework was the first law globally institutionalizing participatory democracy into such an institutionalized context. And then 2 other very interesting examples can be found in the autonomous provinces of Trento and Bolzano, where between 2016 and 2018, citizens were invited to discuss through deliberative democratic innovations the reform of the special status of autonomy. So what we could really call subnational constitution making, so to say, because provincial statute, the special status of autonomy has a constitutional level. So actually involving citizens, we could really refer to that as subnational participatory constitutional. Then I would like to give you a couple of words about the case of Belgium, where a different but very interesting example is offered by the German-speaking community of Belgium, which introduced one of the world's first permanent deliberative institutions. So the Permanent Citizen Council, which is the name of this institution, was instituted in 2019 and is often referred to as the Bürgerdialog, and represents one of the most interesting examples, Europe-wide, I would say also worldwide probably, because rather than organizing one-off citizens' assemblies, this model creates an enduring institutional link between randomly selected citizens and the representative assembly. So its significance lies not only in the deliberative process itself, but also in the fact that participation becomes an ordinary component of democratic governance through a representative body of randomly selected citizens. So this makes it a very exceptional case. If you're interested, then we can discuss a little bit more about how it's composed, but I don't want to take too much time. The third example is Austria. So Austrian Länder also provide another interesting example. In particular, the case of the land of Vorarlberg, which, because participation in the land of Vorarlberg is not only promoted through ordinary legislation and administrative practice, but also recognized within the constitutional framework of the land in 2013. So, in the constitution, in the subnational constitution, which has a constitutional status, because in a federal state, the subnational constitutions are ranked as constitutions, as national constitutions, is mentioned the word Bürgerbeteiligung, so participation of citizens. So for this reason, it's particularly interesting how constitution, even though it has a national level, explicitly introduced a reference to deliberative democratic innovation, so to Bürgerbeteiligung. And this represents an important example of constitutional recognition of participatory democracy at the subnational level. So these were my 3 examples, and let me now give you my final ideas. I think the time is fine. Yeah, perfect. I will take less than 4 minutes, I guess. So I have 3 brief remarks to conclude with. So the first one is that, and I want to underline that, even though I said that before, but that participatory constitutionalism should not be understood as an alternative to representative democracy. In the contrary, its objective is to complement representative institutions and strengthen constitutional democracy. Second, comparative experience shows that participation produces meaningful democratic outcomes only when supported by appropriate institutional and legal frameworks. And third and final, if we want to understand the future development of participatory constitutionalism in Europe, we should look not only at the national constitutional reforms, but we should also pay close attention to the roles increasingly played by subnational units, since these experiences remind us that constitutional innovation often begins at the territorial level, even at the local level, where institutions are closer to citizens and where democratic experimentation is more easily possible. For this reason, I believe that national constitutionalism represents one of the most promising laboratories for the future development of participatory constitutionalism in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Martina, for giving us a picture, a framework of the theoretical aspect, but at the same time, you also introduce the main problems with respect to the relationship between representation, direct democracy, and deliberative democracy. But what I think is really interesting is also to understand how the institutionalization of deliberative participation is relevant or not, because as I know, there is a big discussion about if it is necessary or not to institutionalize deliberative mechanism of participation, but I think that this will a debate. We will discuss this further. Therefore, now, thank you very much. I would like to introduce you Lucia Muselli. Lucia Muselli is professor of administrative law at this university, and in addition to standard courses in administrative law, she teaches environment, climate, energy, regulatory strategies, and information rights and digital markets. As professor of administrative law, she has always been interested in the role of private actors in relation to public authorities, with a particular focus on emerging trends in the field of administrative law. This research interest, in her research interest, she reflected in numerous articles and her forthcoming book, Public Participation in Urban Law. So she became a specialist in public participation in urban law, and today she will speak about starting from neighborhoods to promote civic participation, the experience of the case Case del Quartiere, neighborhood houses in some Italian cities. So we are going to the sub-national level. We move to the sub-national level.
Yes, I can ask her to myself.
Yes, please.
Yes. you. Organize my time. Okay. Okay. Good morning to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today and to share experiences. And I would like a special thank to Professor Angel Di Gregorio and her staff for organizing this forum. And I would like to give a warm welcome to our Italian and foreign colleagues that are our guests in this university. In this presentation, we pass from the general context and the constitutional context to a more specific experience. And in particular, in this presentation, I would like to address three principal points, which may be summarized as follows. The first is referring to the development of public participation in a context of a crisis in representative democracy. Martina Trattel already have spoken about, so I will be strict on my presentation. Second, we proceeded to examine a new model, very interesting model, innovation administrative model, represented by the shared administration, in Italian amministrazione condivisa. So I think this is a new pattern, a new model, a new form of administration, very interesting, very promising. Then we turn to examine the specific experience represented by the Case del Quartiere neighborhood houses in the city of Turin. So this is a concrete explanation of exemplification of the form of amministrazione condivisa in a context, in a specific territorial context. This is, I think, one of the most relevant experience of cooperation between first sector, private, and public administration. So we start from the first point. Already we spoken public participation and crisis of representative democracy. So what are the causes? The causes are well known, and something Martina Trattel spoken about, the growing social complexity, and the complexity is a theme, a central theme, I think. The recurring crisis, crisis not political but economic, and the climate crisis, the crisis linked to the war in very part of the world. I think that in summary, Pierre Rosevallon highlights the fundamental reason of this crisis. He's spoken about dissolution of traditional social structure, with particular mention to the traditional job. Now we have a very different of job, the job connected to the new platform and the sharing economy. So there are reform really interesting. Then we can see among these reasons the decline of Greek ideologies, so are well known, And I think a point is very interesting, the increasing difficulty of political actors to read society. The question of the readability of society from the political parties, the difficulty of analyze, understand society, a society that changes faster than the pattern of the political the traditional idea in the political context. Also, we can see other problems connected to misinformation, deep fakes, AI-related developments. So a lot of reasons that it's impossible to summarize. There is a need to respond to the crisis, and we have already heard about new forms of grassroots democracy appears. Social movements, particularly analyzed by the point of view of the political science, I think, or sociology, political sociology, and participatory democracy and deliberative democracy. The aim of this new form of democracy, new mood of democracy, are to strengthen the involvement of the citizen in public decision making. And here in the picture we can see the citizen picture of the Citizen Assembly for the Climate in Milano, and here in this room we have some of the actors of this participatory process, and in this room other colleagues have studied the Climate Assembly for the Climate, the Permanent Citizen Assembly for the Climate, Professor Sandra Di Gregorio, Professor Arianna Angeli, Mirko della Malva. And it was very interesting also an experimentation put in force in this university to collaborate with the assembly, with a part of students of our courses. So it was a very interesting experience carried out from Professor Di Gregorio and her team. Then we turn to the model of shared administration. I think this is in Italy, it is one of the most innovative mode of new form of administration, new form of a relationship between private parties and public administration. Shared administration is the translation, but it's difficult to translate the Italian expression of amministrazione condivisa, because shared administration, I think, refers to collaborative governance, but it is not only this. Shared administration is more complex. And what is amministrazione condivisa? I try to summarize this pattern, this new pattern. We can see a collaborative public administration model in which public administration and citizen act as partners in equal relationship, in addressing issues of common interest in accordance with article, and so the Constitution and the relevance of Constitution in this democratic innovation is really relevant. Article 118, paragraph 4 of the Italian Constitution, and this article was revised by the provision introduced by the 2000 one Italian constitutional reform. The reform who reorganized the competence between state, region, and other territorial entities. This article 114, paragraph 4, establish this. State, regions, metropolitan cities, provinces, and municipalities, all the territorial entities, shall promote, there is a promotion, the autonomous initiatives of citizens, both as individuals, but also as members of association, in carrying out activities of general interest. And so this is the link with the administration and administrative law, on the basis of the already recalled principle of subsidiarity. In particular, this is a principle of horizontal subsidiarity. We are facing an important transition, a crucial transition from a top-down hierarchical model approach to public administration, the traditional one, the traditional liberal framework, to one new, based on an equal relationship between private parties and public administration. So really a revolution in the traditional way to approach to administration from the part of the citizen. And the model of shared administration initially was developed within legal scholarship. Gregorio Arena, sure, is the leading scholarly reference. And then was, this is very interesting, subsequently, but I think in a short time, was implemented by local authorities. So from the legal scholarship to an implementation by local authorities through two main instruments, two main tools. The first is represented by the local regulation for the care and the management of the urban commons. And we have to remember the prototype regulation that was approved in Bologna. Bologna is a city particular, is a context particularly favorable for the innovation democratic on the profile of participation. So a sort of prototype regulation approved in Bologna in 2014. And the second tool, the second instrument to implement the model of shared administration was represented by collaboration agreements, in Italian patti di collaborazione, collaboration agreements, signed between association, citizen, and public administration to manage, to care the urban common. So this regulation were really important, and this regulation can, the Bologna one, can be regarded as a form of open source regulation made available to other public administration that would like implement the model of shared administration. So really an interesting process for contamination from scholarship and municipality, town, and then the spread of this model in all the town. To date, more than 300 municipalities from the Alps to the Sicily, I think from Bolzano to the Sicily, have adopted regulation on commons, thanks in large part to the, sorry for the wrong, work of LABSUS. LABSUS is the Laboratory for Subsidiarietà, founded from Gregorio Arena, and that played really a key role in the dissemination of the model throughout Italy, different parts of Italy with different needs, small town with big town, in the autonomies of the municipality, they develop in different way this regulation. But there is a model, the Bologna model. What are the principles of shared administration? And here I agree, I totally agree with the presentation, with Martina Trettel's presentation. Sure, among these we can remember mutual trust, transparency, accountability, inclusiveness. This is very important. Civic autonomy, proximity, strong connection to the local authority, but in an independent way from the political part of them. This is very important. And now we move from a general background for the model of amministrazione condivisa, shared administration, to analyze a concrete experience of amministrazione condivisa in a big city in Italy. And the experience is the experience of Turin's Case del Quartiere, neighborhood houses in the translation, but we have to pay attention because in other context, in other geographical context, neighborhood houses are completely different from the experience I will analyze. Before say something about this experience, I want to remember the importance of context. And the context is really important, is crucial for understanding concrete experience of democratic innovation. It's a really path defend in perspective. Turin, the Italian no, but for the international guest, is one of the leading economy center, was in past one of the leading economy centers in northern Italy, historically associated with automotive industry. In Turin, we can find the Fiat headquarters, now Stellantis, the development. And in recent decades, due to the automotive crisis, Torino has diversified industry by developing innovative sector. And today, Turin, like the big Italian town, faces several changes: industrial decline, economy inequalities between center and the suburb, also in Milan, in other town, traffic and environment issues, sure, problem of urban safety. And I think the Casa del Quartiere, the experience of Casa del Quartiere should be inserted in this context. What are the Casa del Quartiere? The neighborhood houses are community-based civic spaces to strengthen, to foster active citizenship and social inclusion. So a double purpose. In concrete, they were formerly abandoned public buildings that at the beginning of the 200s were regenerated and adapted to meet new citizen needs, like support services for immigrants, for example, after-school activities, co-working spaces, bike repair workshops, social tailoring, but also a program of various cultural and multicultural activities. It's very interesting. I have to remember that the public spaces are provided under concession by the municipality, while the case del quartiere are managed by first sector organization, not by public organization, by first sector organization or a team of first sector organization. Today, the eight actually, Turin's Case del Quartiere are formed a network, very interesting, I'm finishing, a network to act as a unified representative in dealings with public administration, because obviously they collaborate with the city of Turin. Now I conclude. This Case del Quartiere display distinctive features from the comparable neighborhood center that was developed in Italy. For example, in Bologna, we found a Case del Quartiere and a network of Case del Quartiere, but are different from the Turin's ones. Which are the particularities of Turin's Case del Quartiere? Yeah, they are bottom-up experience originated from the third sector organization, not top-down, not result from a decision of a political or administrative part. Sure, they collaborate with the city of Turin, but maintaining independence of action. They are management from first sector organization. They have dedicated staff with expertise and training in urban regeneration, and the people start from urban regeneration and the welfare service provision. They have mixed funding because they apply to maintain themselves for public and private tenders, but they fund themselves through economic activities. For example, rent out spaces for parties or similar activities, bar, cafeteria, restaurant. They host multicultural festival and dinner. In the picture, you can find the Cascina Roccafranca that was one of the earliest Casa del Quartiere in the suburb, in Mirafiori Nord, that is a suburb neighbor of. I conclude, I go to conclusion. So I think neighborhood houses represent one of the most significant form of grassroots democratic experimentation. I remember the role, the importance of the experimentation in the democratic participatory innovation in the contemporary cities, in accordance with the solidarity-based model of amministrazione condivisa. And I show you the last picture, Torino, Casa del Quartiere San Salvario. San Salvario is a is not a suburban, but it's a miscomposition neighborhood. And in this courtyard, you can see festival, multi-ethnic dinner, and so I think this is a really explication of what I tried to say you. Thank you for your attention.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Angela Di Gregorio, Lucia Musselli, Caterina Filippini, and all my colleagues in Milan for the kind invitation to discuss such a fascinating topic. And I apologize for my English. I shall do my best. Ok, parte. key words for my speech. First of all, democracy, then participation, and finally, of course, vulnerable groups. The purpose of my speech is not to explain the concept of democracy. Defining democracy is complex, said the political scientist Giovanni Sartori. There are three main risks in this way. First of all, the terminological risk that leads us to discuss the word while forgetting the thing it represents, while forgetting the concept itself. Secondly, the perfectionist risk that leads us to judge actual democracies against the standard of an ideal model which generates utopianism. And finally, the risk of falling into simplification. That means we simplify the definition while ignoring its complexity. Obviously, that doesn't mean giving up on the pursuit of the democratic ideal. Whilst we all know what an ideal democracy should be like, very little is known about the conditions necessary for a viable democracy. It's important to see what actually works. According to Sartori, we must be pragmatic without ceasing to ask ourselves what democracy ought to be in order to ensure an open, non-oppressive society founded on the principle of representation and the limitation of power. This is the perspective from which I will proceed, bearing in mind what the politician Antonio Gramsci wrote. The most realistic meaning of democracy must be defined in connection with the concept of hegemony. In an hegemonic system, democracy exists if the law favors the transition from led groups to ruling groups. The second word is participation, of course. Here, the distinction between participatory democracy, deliberative democracy, and representative democracy, whose origins and distinctive features are very clearly highlighted by Antonio Floridia in the volume edited by Angela Di Gregorio in 2026. That's why I shall not go into them at length. Just one thing to remember, as the colleagues have said before, participatory democracy and deliberative democracy are not an alternative to representative democracy, but form a continuum with it, complementing it. In his book, Come si misura una democrazia, Sabino Cassese points out that in front of voter abstention, what is most surprising is invisible participation. Many people are not interested in politics and are prepared to leave the running of the state to others. What consequences then? Democracy thus transforms, according to Gustavo Zagrebelsky, from government of the people, according to Rousseau, into government for the people, aided by delusions that accompany political disintermediation. Investing in participatory democracy and deliberative democracy helps us to restore the democratic nature of public decision making, making institutional mediation more productive. The third word is vulnerable groups. The lack of democratic legitimacy in decision making is not solely due to political disengagement, of course, but to the obstacles that affect the rights of a part of the population to participate, resulting in forms of systemic discrimination. That's the heart of my speech dedicated to participation rights of vulnerable groups. Two questions above all. First of all, what is meant by vulnerable groups? Secondly, what are the obstacles affecting the participatory rights of vulnerable groups, and how can we promote the active involvement of these groups in collective decision-making processes? So what is meant by vulnerable groups? In 1999, Michele Ainis wrote an essay entitled I soggetti deboli nella giurisprudenza costituzionale. According to Italian constitutional code, these were and still are the poor, the sick, people with disabilities, women, children, foreigners, and so on. In short, all those who, by virtue of their personal and social characteristics, are at risk of discrimination and marginalization, a risk against which the Italian Constitution has provided for ad hoc programs of social emancipation. Vulnerable people are the different, those who are defined as such on the basis of a standard of supposed social normality, which regards men, citizens, heterosexual and deaf individuals as the norm. What consequences then for the legal concept of vulnerability? From one side, this concept gives a voice and rights to those who previously had none. From the other side, this gives rise to a law for the vulnerable as opposed to a law for the powerful. The legal system provides for differential legal treatment and special protective measures, which often take on a paternalistic character. That's the case of the affirmative actions. The risk is that the new forms of discrimination may be introduced. Which are the risks of classification systems then? Classification systems oppress the people by design. First of all, because they imply they are inferior. And secondly, because they allow the dominant culture to marginalize those they consider outcasts. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities introduces a new concept of vulnerability. The article interested is Article 12, entitled Equal Recognition Before the Law. States parties reaffirm that persons with disabilities have the right to recognition everywhere as persons before the law. So, if previously we had the concept of vulnerability defined as an intrinsic individual condition, now we have a new concept of vulnerability defined as a relational condition, which depends very much on the context. The consequence is that to eliminate or reduce vulnerability, we must first and foremost invest in the wider context. So what can we do in this way? The American author and activist James Carton first heard about the principle of nothing about us without us in relation to people with disabilities in 1993 in South Africa. What does it mean? The slogan is, when others speak for you, you lose. That's the meaning of the principle. First of all, people with disability must be involved in decisions that affect their lives. And secondly, people with disabilities need to secure what the philosopher Jamila Ribeiro calls spaces or forums of speech. This is an issue that affects not only people with disabilities, of course, but more generally social groups that are victims of systematic oppression, such as LGBTIQ+ people. How to realize this principle then? The UN Convention enshrines the right of persons with disabilities to participate fully in political and public life and contribute to monitoring its implementation by states. For systemic problems, systemic solutions must be found, and accessibility is the key. But what does it mean? The European Union has adopted three main measures in this way. First of all, the European Accessibility Act of 2019. Secondly, the European Strategy for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, entitled Union of Equality. And finally, the Dublin Recommendation 2023. All these documents commit states to removing the barriers that hinder participation of people with disabilities in collective decision making. Which is the direction then? First of all, according to what I said before, we must invest in the principle, nothing about us without us. A person with a disability is transformed from an object into a subject. From the traditional model of organization for people with disabilities, in which third parties represent them, to a new model of organization of people with disabilities in which they represent themselves. That's the model of self-representation. This both avoids the risk of objectification discussed by Martha Nussbaum in all her writings. At the 19th UN conference, the self-advocate and activist Janet Cherchuk, representing Down Syndrome International, noted that there are still too many barriers preventing people with intellectual disabilities from actively participating in decision-making processes. People with intellectual disabilities are often not invited, and when they are, the conditions are not in place for them. The materials are too long, for example. Texts are not provided in easy-to-read language. People speak too quickly, and nobody asks them if they have understood. That's not participation, it's decoration, she said. And yet there are documents, there are guidelines. The problem, therefore, is not how, but why so little is still being done. So what can we do now? We need to invest in the self-advocacy model within a framework inspired by the principle of universal design as set out in Article 2 of the CRPD. Universal design means the design of products, environments, programs and services to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. Universal design means that the environment is designed ex ante previously to accommodate the widest possible range of users, so as to prevent, then remedy the disadvantage. The environment adapts to the user's needs, whatever the circumstances. As you know, until the 3rd of August, it is possible to submit a written contribution via the UN website to the draft general comment on Article 29 of the CRPD, which deals with the issue of participation. The invitation is open to everyone, especially to organizations of persons with disabilities. That's the link. To conclude, if you'll allow me, and if we have time, I'd like to show you a very short video, less than 2 minutes, I think. A spot. It's a spot about the project Io Cittadino, I Citizen by ANFAS, promotes the active participation of people with intellectual disabilities in public decision-making processes. The goal of participation requires, on the one hand, that people with intellectual disabilities become aware of their personal condition, and on the other, that they develop the decision-making capacity. that is the ability to make decisions for themselves on matters that affect them. For this purpose, ANFAS has set up a national platform for self-advocates written in an easy-to-read format so that people with intellectual disabilities can understand and make their own decisions. The translation isn't great, I'm sorry, because it's a machine translated and there's also a technical problem, but I hope you can out the meaning. Enjoy the video.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a bit difficult now to speak after your speech because as a German family, we have a history with the T4 massacre in the Nazi regime. Yeah, it's in the families. So yeah, it's a completely different presentation which will now take place, but again, it's a bit complicated. So what I would like to resume is on the presentation, Martina, for you, the definition by Arthur and Escobar on democratic innovation. Yeah. Second, I would like to resume perspective on legal orders. Yeah, what's going on in constitutional order. Thirdly, I agree with you on the point that democratic innovations are complements or layers to represented democracies. And fourthly and finally, I resume your point, which you already brought up, that the subnational order is important. Yeah, so this is something we agree and where we speak to each other. Having said this, my research question is on the state of law-based citizen assemblies. This is law-based citizen assemblies, and that is what we're talking about when we talk about democratic innovation. The paper we had in European political science was about participatory budgeting, it was about direct democratic referendum and what have you. Now I speak only about law-based citizen assemblies. This is This is my contribution, so to say. And this contribution goes to the question, how can we explain the weak current state of national institutionalization in Germany? Yeah. So what's going on there? I start with a certain concept, and the concept is a concept I have in mind. Okay? I have in mind a concept of radical change. This is, for instance, layering. Yeah, layering means that you put some new regulatory orders to the old order. Yeah, and layer and complement the old. Yeah. And there might be also some sort of disruptive change on particular occasions. Second, in order to describe the process of law-based citizen assemblies in Germany, I look at a particular concept which is a bit similar. Wow, okay. You're okay? I'm fine. I have the listening devices. Okay. The concept to which I refer is the multiple streams concept, saying that there are three independent but coupled streams in policies. Yeah, this means there are problems, there are policies and solutions, and politics. Yeah, and problems, solutions, and politics can be coupled, but they're not necessarily coupled. They're independent. Yeah, yeah. This is the idea that politicians work on occasions. Yeah, there is no clear policy cycle like you first do this, then you do this, and you do. You simple play by ear, have a window of opportunity, and then go along with your particular initiative. So this is the concept, and the first problem has already been mentioned, and it was mentioned by you, Martina, again. I resume this point is about some sort of democratic crisis. Yeah, I don't share this with the complexity, but this is not the main point. Yeah. We have an idea of loss of diffuse and specific support of the political system. We have an idea of polarization, which is meant to be something bad. I don't share this. But then we have the idea of there should be some sort of democratic resilience. Yeah. So there is an idea of problems, crisis in democracy. That is something that's going on. Yeah, I can speak about this for half an hour. I would leave it with two minutes. More interesting is this figure. This figure is from our database, and it's on law-based citizen assemblies in Germany since 2010. Sorry. And what you see is there is a rise in law-based citizen assemblies since 2020. Yeah. So, and again, take your point, nearly 90% of these citizen assemblies are on the local level. Yeah, and mainly on the local level. And when we look at the regional level, we don't have the regions. We have the German Länder, 60 Länder, and the localities are by constitutions, Article 8, part of the Länder, of the federal. Yeah? So they don't have any any right to stipulate their own regulation. Yeah, this is important. There's only a small part, which is called the voluntary task of the localities, in which local jurisdiction has some sort of discretion. Yeah, and then we have civil block-based civil assemblies on the national level, and we had several on Länder level. Yeah. Having said this, what we see first, what is the state of civil assemblies in Germany as a certain kind of policy and solution to whatever problem. Yeah. Independent stream. There's an increase of block-based civil assemblies. There is a multi-level upscaling. Yeah. There is some sort of local institutional continuation in the local statutes. And now we come back again, Martina, sorry to say this, we come back to your part when you look at Ostbelgien. Near, on the other side of on the German part, there is the city Aachen, yeah, and Aachen tried to copy the Ostbelgien model, and it was a certain kind of policy diffusion, yeah. Aachen and Cologne, yeah, so very prone to the Ostbelgien model, yeah. Now we have what we call then some problems or some problems in trials in institutional design. And first, what we see is there is a lot of block-based civil assemblies, but they have no impact. Yeah. Recommending institutions. What I do when I'm a politician, recommendations are not what I'm doing. Yeah. Please have your playground, citizen assembly, do that. Yeah. It sounds simple, and now the next turn in participatory politics and civil assemblies was to couple or try to couple civil assemblies with direct referendum. Yeah, to bring this together. Yeah, we carry a project on this, and it's very, very difficult. Yeah, for a couple of reasons. It's very difficult. There's the time lag. Yeah, you have the citizen assembly, and 9 months later you have some sort of referendum. You need to formulate one precise question which you could give to a direct to a referendum, which is not the same that having a recommendation with a number of or a couple of different issues and prioritizations. And the next question is, and it took place the last 3 years, to couple democratic innovation with representative democracy. Yeah, on the local level, on the federal level, and on the national level. Yeah, how can you bring the civil assembly to the parliaments? Yeah, and on the local level, it's not too. It's it's not really an issue because people are prone to the process in the localities. Yeah, you have a local the local representatives. They know what's going on. They're aware in the deliberation for some reasons. Yeah, and they see, okay, we spend money. We acknowledge the participation of the citizens. Now we go at least for some recommendations. Yeah, it's more a problem on the national level and the federal level, because the representatives in the parliaments are way apart from the deliberations on these two levels. And what we have here is there's still going on some sort of a problem. It does not function on the federal and national. Now I come to politics, which is the most explanatory factor for CAs as a solution. Sorry, I forgot the problems. Every solution poses problems. Yeah, there is no solution without a new problem. Yeah, and the problem which we have is that the lack of impact of decoupled democratic innovations causes citizen disappointment and loss of support. Yeah, so there was a piling up disappointment instead of diminishing the loss of satisfaction. Civil assemblies are expensive. Really expensive, and what we see at the moment is there's a new change in fiscal policies. I can explain it in the debate. It's complicated, and there is a change in subsidies. The problem with democratic Leben, Demokratie Leben, is a program, was a program supporting local initiatives. Yeah, the now incumbent government decided to stop the program, to evaluate the program in order to get up the leftists and bring in the center and the right initiatives. Yeah, so instead of what have you, initiative of disabled, they now look for the Red Cross. Yeah, to make it that simple. Yeah, this is changing. And then we had some legal problems, in particular with adjustments to resident and registration law, because you need that data. Yeah, and there are some adjustments were to be changed. Final point. Party cleavages, politics. There is no or only a weak institutionalization in Germany beyond one country. I'll explain it in a minute. Yeah, but in general, politics consists of party cleavages, left and right, and so in Germany, at least, law-based civil assemblies are issued right. The left camp, there are NGOs promoting civil assemblies and mehr Demokratie, schlichte Mitarbeit, agencies do all this in the legal epistemic communities. Legal epistemic communities. We have two camps, yeah, two camps opposing each other. The one is on Martin Pouch. He's a legal professor for, I would say, he's on the left camp. Yeah, and the other is Matthias Dreiser, who's on the red camp. Yeah, you have a small, only some articles on what's going on. So this is a debate that's going on in the epistemic community of the legal schools. Yeah, only another one and public community. The finest. What we have here is that is the main point of my presentation. We have a couple of practices and our market-level increasing here. We have no institutionalization on the national and federal level. Again, Baden-Württemberg, I explained it in a minute. And the most decisive point is party politics and the left-right cleavage on this level. Yeah, if there will be some sort of left kind of victory in elections, you will have civil incentives. That's simple for me as a political scientist. Now I come to the unexpected case of Baden-Württemberg. Baden-Württemberg is the only region, land, which have some sort of institutionalization and legal order for law-based citizens. Why? Crucial point goes back to 2011, and then you have the one hand, you may remember that Fukushima as a big issue on the global stage, and you have on the in a country, Baden-Württemberg, we have a big issue on big station Stuttgart 21. Yeah, Stuttgart 21 was a scandal. It still is a scandal. Yeah, because so many people was a polarized issue in the land politics. And now the first Green Prime Minister on a Länder level came into power, and now had to fix compromise on Stuttgart 21. Yeah, and he did it in two ways. On the one hand, he said, "Okay, let's decide on a referendum. What do the people in Baden-Württemberg want to?" Yeah, the majority for Stuttgart 21 was on the right camp, and he brought in then politics, a new politics to become heard. Yeah, in terms of hearing, listening to people. Yeah, and he set up own regulation on that. He set up an administration on that, and when you have Baden-Württemberg some sort of issue like you want to set up a forum on particular issues like whatever windmills and what have you, you can address to this agency, get money for your process, and get some become assistance in order to bring in moderation agencies. Yeah, so this is the only country, this state, yeah, Baden-Württemberg, where we see some sort of constitutionalization, and it's the crucial part is that a Green Prime Minister tried to survive politically in a black country, by which is conservative, characterized to be conservative in the electorate. Yeah, this is particularly the only one. Thank you for that.
Because of debate, I think that nowadays there is not the question for people analyze the good is also participation of the general debate at the federal level about both of the countries. So, going back to Martina, represents the debate creating a relationship between the democracy, representative democracy, and direct. So thank you very much. Yes, Martina.
Yeah. Yeah? Okay. So thank you all. It was very interesting. I'm very curious about the German case because, as I was mentioning, I'm dealing with the governance, so of course, and implementations. So of course, Germany is a very interesting case. And I would have two kind of specific questions for you regarding the two examples that you mentioned. So I would be interested in understanding how is Aachen model works. So, because the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's set on another level of government, so it's at the local level, whereas in Belgium, it's on the regional level of government, right? So it's like set on another level. So I guess also the structure must be different somehow. And I would be very curious about it. Then the second question is about the fact that you mentioned that many times countries nowadays in Germany prepare referenda. Did I understand correctly? Or because the question is, so I don't know if you're familiar with the Particon model of the US. Thinking about yes, really well. Do you know this model there? So just briefly, Particon is a state where the direct democracy is very much used, and so they decided to introduce citizen assemblies or citizen juries for preparing like reports for citizens by citizens, so to say. But what I'm aware of is that Germany is not a direct democratic country, so there are not so many direct democratic instruments. So I was wondering, I think the logic is different. I think the logic, if I understood correctly, is that you organize a citizen assembly, and in the end, you put a referendum. So where it was not foreseen. Am I correct? Or
yes, but sorry.
so the logic is different.
Yes, but I say no, but I know that at local level, after a legislative initiative, they go to a referendum. Before, according to the this was the rule, but I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to understand how these things work. So how was it thought to prepare citizens for a referendum, or to say come to a conclusion of the citizen assembly through a referendum. So this is the question. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. A couple of questions, but two different clusters. First is Aachen.
Yeah.
Aachen.
Sorry, because we are interested.
Aachen, turn again.
Is it what?
Aachen.
Yeah. I think you were also hearing me because just now. Yeah, no.
It's not working anymore. I don't know. Yo,
Sorry.
no, I.
Okay, again, Aachen. Aachen is near to the Australian community. Yeah. when you go on the market, for instance, in Maastricht or Liège or Aachen, you hear 3 different languages. Yeah, it's like French, German, and Flemish. Yeah, all mixed together. Yeah, so it does not make sense to have one institution in one part of this region and think about the others. Won't be informed about this. Yeah. So Aachen saw okay that there is here a Belgian model and tried to copy this in a certain way. So they had up also a standing committee of lot-based citizens. Yeah, standing committee of the lot-based citizens carried out 3 processes of deliberation until 2025. Yeah.
When was it?
Hmm?
When was it?
When?
When?
The last 3 years.
Okay, so it was included 3 years ago.
Yeah. And now there was a hearing in the Aachen Mayor Hall about what does it make sense? Of course, they realized that these deliberation considered issues that are not legally part of the localities. Yeah. Yeah. So the citizens said, okay, we want to have some sort of a new road. Yeah. Roads, lanes are not part of certain roads, are not part of the local competencies, part of the lender, and it can be given. So there was certain, what I mean, it piled up with political disappointment about recommendations that were not in the part and then the competences of the localities. Now they set up in January or try to set up a new process in which the administration has a stronger say because they know about the competencies. Yeah. So this was a problem. Yeah, it's different. So you started to copy the Belgian model and realized that the localities in Germany have much little competences. Yeah. So a certain part of misleading copying. It was a cooperation, and what based on citizens. Citizens again, they have the legal knowledge. Yeah, but what's
not at the institutional level.
yeah.
Not at the institutional level, which among most bodies.
Yeah, they were kind second, the Oregon model. We right now carry out a project in 4 localities in Germany where we try to control if coupling between deliberation and direct decision, referendum, it makes a difference. Yeah. What we realized is for the citizens, there is no difference. Yeah. They have no idea of what's going on. The direct decision, yeah, a referendum is far away from their time order. Yeah, doesn't matter. Yeah, from our thoughts. Then we realized that there is a certain kind of time gap because referendums are expensive. So to put the referendums on the dates of, for instance, federal elections, general local elections, yeah. But then the issues diminished. New agenda set. Finally, what we learned, or what the project team learned, we are only in the position of scientific evaluation, which is comfortable. They learned that's really difficult. Have certain number of recommendations and to pick a very precise question which you can answer with yes or no. Yeah. This is a transformation. I realized that in the first 3 cases, now we discuss the origin. Yeah. And try to give participants a couple of recommendations if they have to try. Yeah.
Then we have to go on that.